Welcome. Tonight, our journey takes us not outward to the stars, but downward, down into a different kind of darkness, a darkness that lies not above us, but beneath. Beneath the waves, beneath the reach of sunlight, beneath the noise of the surface world. We are traveling to the sunken places, the lost cities, the civilizations that once stood in the light and now rest in the deep. These are not myths, though myth surrounds them. These are real places with real streets and real temples and real stones that were cut by human hands. And they are down there now, waiting, beneath the water, beneath the sediment, beneath centuries of silence. Take a slow breath now. Feel the air in your lungs. Feel the solid ground beneath you. The world above is familiar, comfortable, safe. But tonight, we are leaving that world behind. We are going down into the water, into the darkness, into the unknown. We are going to visit the cities that were lost to the sea. The journey will be long and it will be slow. There is no hurry. The sunken cities have been waiting for centuries. They can wait a little longer. We will descend at our own pace, taking time to explore each city, to understand its story, to feel its presence. There is no rush. The deep is patient, and we must learn to be patient too. So settle into a comfortable position. Let the weight of the day slip away. Let the sounds of the world fade into the background. The journey is about to begin. We are going down into the deep. We think of the past as something we can see. We visit ruins that stand above ground. We walk through Roman forums and Greek temples and medieval castles. We touch the stones and feel connected to those who came before. But the past is not all above ground. Some of it has sunk. Some of it has slipped beneath the surface of the sea, carried down by earthquakes and rising waters and the slow, patient movement of the earth itself. These lost places are still there. They are preserved in the cold, dark, oxygen-poor depths where time moves more slowly, where the decay is slower, where a wooden beam can last for thousands of years, where a human footprint can be preserved in the sediment, where a city can wait for centuries to be discovered. What lies beneath the ocean is not just the geological history of the planet. It is the history of our own species, the story of civilizations that rose and fell and then were swallowed by the sea. Some of them we know about, some of them we have only begun to discover, and some of them perhaps we have not found at all. They are still down there, hidden under the mud and the darkness, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves to the world above. The ocean is a vast museum. Its galleries are the seafloor. Its exhibits are the drowned works of human hands. The statues and the temples and the streets, the tools and the weapons and the jewelry, the bones of the people themselves, who lived and loved and died in cities that are now beneath the water. The ocean does not discriminate. It preserves the grand and the humble alike, the palace of a king and the hut of a fisherman, the temple of a god and the workshop of a craftsman. All of them are down there in the darkness, preserved by the cold and the pressure and the lack of oxygen. So let us go down now. Let us leave the surface behind. Let us descend through the layers of water, each meter taking us further from the present and deeper into the past. The pressure builds, the light fades. The sounds of the world above grow distant and strange. The blue of the shallows gives way to the indigo of the depths, and the indigo gives way to the black of the abyss. And below us, in the silence, the sunken cities wait. The water grows colder as we descend. The temperature drops, the pressure increases, and the last traces of light fade away. We are entering a world that is older than the world above, a world that has existed since the beginning of time. The water that surrounds us has been here for millions of years, circulating through the depths, carrying the memory of the planet. We are not just descending through space, we are descending through time itself. Each layer of water represents a different era. The surface waters belong to the present, to the world of light and life and human activity. The deeper waters belong to the past, to the world of darkness and silence and mystery. As we descend, we are moving backward through time, leaving the present behind, and entering the realms of history and prehistory. The sunken cities that we are about to visit are not just places, They are portals to the past. The first city we must speak of is the one that has haunted the human imagination for more than 2,000 years. The first lost city, the original sunken civilization, the one that has inspired countless books and films and expeditions, the one that has become a symbol of all that is mysterious and lost, Atlantis. The story comes to us from Plato, the Greek philosopher, who wrote about it around 360 years before the Common Era. In his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, Plato describes a powerful and advanced civilization that existed 9,000 years before his own time. A civilization that ruled over a large island in the Atlantic Ocean, beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which is what the ancient Greeks called the Strait of Gibraltar. A civilization that grew proud and greedy and corrupt, and that in a single day and night of catastrophic earthquakes and floods, sank into the sea and was never seen again. Plato gives us details. He describes the layout of the capital city, with its concentric rings of land and water. He describes the palaces and the temples and the canals. He describes the wealth of the island, the metals and the timber and the animals. He describes the laws and the government and the military power. The level of detail is remarkable. It reads less like a myth and more like a historical account. And this is what has puzzled and fascinated people for 2 millennia. Was Plato recording an actual historical event that had been passed down through Egyptian records and Greek oral tradition? Or was he inventing a fictional utopia to illustrate his philosophical ideas about the nature of power and civilization? Scholars are divided on this question. The majority view among classical scholars is that Atlantis was a fictional invention, a philosophical allegory. Plato often used stories and myths to illustrate his ideas. The story of Atlantis serves as a moral lesson about the dangers of hubris and the impermanence of power. There is no mention of Atlantis in any other Greek text before Plato, which is strange if it was a well-known historical event. And the details Plato gives, the 9,000 years before his time, the location beyond the Pillars of Hercules, the advanced technology, all of these seem to fit better with a philosophical invention than with a historical record. And yet the idea of Atlantis will not die. It has persisted in human culture for over 2,000 years, evolving and adapting with each new generation. In the Renaissance, when Europeans were exploring the Atlantic, they wondered if the Canary Islands or the Azores might be the remnants of Atlantis. In the 19th century, Ignatius Donnelly wrote a book called Atlantis, The Antediluvian World, which argued that Atlantis was real and that all human civilization had descended from it. In the 20th century, the psychic Edgar Cayce claimed that Atlantis would rise again near the Bahamas. And in the 21st century, the search for Atlantis continues, driven by satellite imagery and underwater archaeology and the enduring human hope that somewhere, beneath the waves, a lost world is waiting to be found. There is no scientific evidence for Atlantis, as Plato described it. Geologists have found no evidence of a large island sinking in the Atlantic in the time frame Plato describes. But many researchers believe that the story of Atlantis may have been inspired by real historical events. The most popular theory connects Atlantis with the eruption of the volcano on the island of Thera, modern-day Santorini, in the Aegean Sea. Around 1,600 years before the Common Era, Thera erupted in one of the largest volcanic explosions in human history. The eruption caused a massive tsunami that devastated the Minoan civilization on the nearby island of Crete. The Minoans were an advanced Bronze Age civilization with palaces and running water and sophisticated art. The eruption of Thera may have weakened them to the point where they were conquered by the Mycenaeans from mainland Greece. The memory of this catastrophe, passed down through generations, may have been the seed that grew into the story of Atlantis. There is another theory too. Some researchers suggest that the story of Atlantis may be based on the flooding of the Black Sea. Around 7,600 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, rising sea levels caused the Mediterranean to break through the Bosporus and flood into the Black Sea basin, which had been a freshwater lake. The flooding was catastrophic. The water rose rapidly, forcing the people living around the lake to flee. Entire settlements were submerged. The memory of this event, preserved in oral tradition, may have traveled westward and eventually reached Plato. And there is yet another possibility, one that is less well known but equally fascinating. The ancient Greek city of Helike, on the coast of the Peloponnese, was destroyed and submerged by an earthquake and tsunami in 373 before the Common Era, just a few years before Plato wrote about Atlantis. The city was a powerful and wealthy center of trade, and its sudden disappearance was a major event in the Greek world. Some scholars have suggested that the destruction of Helike, which happened so close to Plato's time and in the Greek world itself, may have provided the inspiration for the story of Atlantis. Helike was never rebuilt. The ruins of the city remained visible beneath the water for centuries, a ghostly reminder of the power of the sea. There will always be those who believe that Atlantis was real. There will always be those who search for it, and in a sense, they are right to search. Because even if Plato's Atlantis was a fiction, the world beneath the waves is full of real lost cities, real sunken civilizations, real places that were once alive with human activity and now lie in darkness, waiting to be rediscovered. The search for Atlantis is really a search for all of them. One of the most likely candidates for the real historical inspiration behind the Atlantis myth is the ancient Greek city of Helike. Helike was a prosperous city in the region of Achaea, on the northern coast of the Peloponnese. It was the leading city of the Achaean League, a powerful confederation of Greek city-states. The city was wealthy and influential, and it was known throughout the Greek world for its temple to Poseidon, the god of the sea and of earthquakes. In the winter of 373 before the Common Era, just a few years before Plato wrote about Atlantis, Helike was destroyed. A massive earthquake struck the region, and the ground beneath the city began to shake violently. The tremors were followed by a catastrophic tsunami, a wall of water that surged inland and swept over the city. Helike was submerged. The buildings collapsed. The people drowned. The entire city disappeared beneath the waters of the Gulf of Corinth. The destruction of Helike was recorded by ancient historians, including Strabo and Pausanias. They wrote that the ruins of the city were visible beneath the water for centuries, a ghostly reminder of the disaster. Fishermen reported that their nets would sometimes catch on the submerged walls and statues of the lost city. The memory of Helike haunted the Greek imagination, a real example of a city that had been swallowed by the sea. For centuries, the exact location of Helike was unknown. The coastline of the region had changed over time, and the ruins of the city had been buried under sediment. Archaeologists searched for Helike for more than 200 years without success. It was not until 2001 that the city was finally discovered by a team of Greek and American archaeologists using sonar and other remote sensing techniques. The discovery of Helike was a major archaeological event. The ruins of the city were found buried under sediment in a coastal lagoon about 2 kilometers from the current coastline. The archaeologists found the remains of walls and buildings, pottery and coins, and the foundations of the Temple of Poseidon. The city was not in the open sea, as the ancient historians had suggested, but in a lagoon that had formed over the centuries as the coastline changed. The story of Helike is in many ways closer to the story of Atlantis than any other sunken city. It was a wealthy and powerful city that was destroyed by an earthquake and a flood. It sank into the sea, and it was never rebuilt. The memory of its destruction was preserved in historical records and in oral tradition. And the story of Helike was well known in the Greek world at the time when Plato was writing about Atlantis. It is entirely possible that the destruction of Helike, which happened so close to Plato's time and in the Greek world itself, provided the inspiration for the story of Atlantis. The search for Helike continues. The site is still being excavated, and new discoveries are being made. The sunken city is revealing its secrets slowly, as the archaeologists work to uncover the remains of this once great city. Helike is a reminder that the real sunken cities of the world are often just as fascinating as the mythical ones. One of the most remarkable of these real sunken cities is Thonis Herakleion. This city was known from ancient texts. Greek historians wrote about it. Egyptian inscriptions mentioned it. It was said to be a great port city, the gateway to Egypt, where ships from all over the Mediterranean came to trade. But for centuries, no one knew where it was. It had simply vanished. The texts said it was somewhere near the mouth of the Nile, but no trace of it had ever been found above water. It was assumed to be a legend, a mythical city that had never really existed. Then, in the year 2000, a French underwater archaeologist named Frank Gaudiot, working with the European Institute for Underwater Archaeology, made a discovery that changed everything. He was surveying the waters of Abu Qir Bay, off the coast of Egypt, near the modern city of Alexandria. He had been searching for sunken ships from the Napoleonic era, but his instruments detected something else, something large, something buried under the sediment of the seafloor. When his team began to excavate, they found a city. Thonis Heracleion was real. It had been there all along, beneath about 10 meters of water and layers of mud and sand. The city had been founded around the 8th century before the Common Era, and it had been one of the most important port cities in the Mediterranean world. It sat at the mouth of the Canopic branch of the Nile, controlling access to the interior of Egypt. All ships entering Egypt from the Mediterranean had to pass through Thonis Heracleion. They paid taxes there. They traded there. They rested and resupplied there. The city was wealthy and cosmopolitan, a crossroads of cultures. The city was dedicated to the god Amun, and it contained a great temple where the pharaohs came to receive their divine authority. The city was also associated with Heracles, the Greek hero, who was said to have visited it. This is why the Greeks called it Heracleion, the city of Heracles, while the Egyptians called it Thonis. The dual identity of the city reflects its dual nature, a place where Greek and Egyptian cultures met and mingled. For centuries, Thonis Heracleion thrived. The harbor was filled with ships from Greece and Phoenicia and Cyprus and beyond. The streets were crowded with merchants and sailors and priests and officials. The temples were filled with the smoke of incense and the sound of prayers. The city was a center of trade, a center of religion, a center of power. Then, around the 2nd or 3rd century of the Common Era, it began to decline. The Canopic branch of the Nile silted up, and the city lost its access to the interior. The rising sea levels, combined with the gradual sinking of the Nile Delta, caused the ground beneath the city to become unstable. Earthquakes shook the region. The soil liquefied, and the buildings began to sink into the mud. The people abandoned the city, moving to other ports that were still accessible, and Thonis Heracleion was left to the sea. Over the centuries, the city was buried under sediment. The stone blocks of the temples and the statues of the gods and the anchors of the ships were all covered by a thick layer of sand and mud. The city disappeared from memory. It became a legend. And then, 2,000 years later, it was found again. What the archaeologists discovered was astonishing. The site covers an area of about 1 square kilometer. The remains of the city are remarkably well preserved, protected by the sediment that covered them. The excavators found colossal statues of gods and pharaohs. They found a stele, a stone slab with inscriptions, that provided crucial information about the city. They found the remains of temples and shrines and public buildings. They found ships, dozens of them, preserved in the mud, with their cargoes still intact. They found coins and jewelry and pottery and tools. They found the everyday objects of a living city, frozen in time. The most stunning discovery was the Temple of Amun, the main religious center of the city. The temple was enormous, with walls and columns and statues. The entrance was flanked by 2 colossal statues of the god Hapi, carved from red granite and standing over 5 meters tall. Inside the temple, the archaeologists found a massive stele, almost 2 meters tall, known as the Stele of Heracleion. The stele is carved with inscriptions that record the tax laws of the city, revealing the economic life of this ancient port. The stele also contains the name of the city, Heracleion, in Greek letters, confirming the identity of the site beyond any doubt. The statues found at the site are among the finest examples of Ptolemaic art. There is a statue of the god Hapi, the god of the Nile flood, carved from red granite and standing over 5 meters tall. There is a statue of a Ptolemaic queen, possibly Cleopatra, dressed in the robes of the goddess Isis. There is a statue of the god Serapis, a syncretic deity that combined Greek and Egyptian elements, with his distinctive beard and his basket of grain. These statues were not just works of art. They were objects of worship, placed in the temples to receive the prayers and offerings of the faithful. The ships found at Thonis Heracleion are another remarkable discovery. More than 70 ships have been identified at the site, making it one of the largest collections of ancient ships in the world. The ships were buried in the mud of the ancient harbor, preserved by the lack of oxygen. Some of them were still loaded with their cargoes when they sank. The study of these ships has revealed a wealth of information about ancient shipbuilding techniques, trade routes, and the economic life of the Mediterranean world. The wood of the ships, preserved for 2,000 years in the oxygen-poor mud, tells the story of the forests that once grew on the shores of the Mediterranean, the trees that were cut and shaped into vessels that carried the commerce of the ancient world. Thonis Heracleion is a reminder that the sunken cities of the world are not just legends. They are real places. They exist. They are down there, beneath the water, waiting to tell their stories. And Thonis Heracleon is just one of them. There are many more. And as our technology improves, as we develop better sonar and better diving equipment and better methods of underwater excavation, we are finding more of them. The lost cities are being found again, one by one. From the Mediterranean, we travel east. We cross the Red Sea and the Arabian Sea. We travel to the coast of India, to the Gulf of Kambat, where another lost city waits beneath the waves. This is Dwarka. Dwarka is one of the 7 most ancient cities of India. It is said to have been the kingdom of Lord Krishna, the divine hero of the Hindu epic, the Mahabharata. According to legend, Krishna founded the city after he fled from Mathura, and it was a place of great beauty and prosperity. The city was built on the coast, with palaces and temples and gardens. It was a golden city, a city of light. The walls were said to be made of gold. The streets were lined with jewels, and the air was filled with the sound of music. But after Krishna left the world, the city was swallowed by the sea. For centuries, this was considered a legend, a beautiful story, but not history. The archaeologists found ancient remains on the coast of Gujarat, near the modern city of Dwarka. But they were modest. There were temples and foundations, but nothing that matched the scale of the legendary city. The evidence seemed to suggest that Dwarka was a myth, not a historical place. Then, in the 1980s, marine archaeologists from the National Institute of Oceanography in India began to survey the waters off the coast of Dwarka. They used side-scan sonar and echo sounders to map the seafloor. What they found was extraordinary. Beneath the water, extending for several kilometers along the coast, was a series of structures, walls, pillars, foundations of buildings, all of them lying underwater, at depths ranging from a few meters to over 30 meters. The structures were clearly man-made. They had been cut and shaped and placed by human hands. The underwater excavations that followed revealed a complex and extensive settlement. The archaeologists found stone anchors, evidence of a thriving port. They found pottery and beads and other artifacts. They found the remains of a jetty or a dock. They found the walls of buildings, arranged in a grid pattern, suggesting a planned city. Carbon dating of organic materials from the site suggested that the settlement was between 3,000 and 4,000 years old, making it one of the oldest known urban settlements in India. The discovery of underwater Dwarka was a major archaeological event. It seemed to confirm the ancient texts. The city of Krishna was real. But the controversy was not over. Some archaeologists questioned the dating of the site. They pointed out that the artifacts found at the site were not necessarily from the same period as the structures. They argued that the structures themselves could be natural formations, not man-made. The debate continues to this day, but for many the evidence is convincing. The structures at Dwarka are clearly the remains of a human settlement. The layout of the walls, the presence of anchors, the artifacts found at the site all point to a planned urban center, and the location matches the descriptions in the ancient texts. A city on the coast, a port, a place of wealth and importance. The legend of Dwarka, it seems, had a basis, in fact. The geological history of the region provides a possible explanation for how the city sank. The coast of Gujarat is tectonically active. The region has experienced earthquakes and changes in sea level over the centuries. It is possible that a combination of seismic activity and rising sea levels caused the city to be gradually submerged. The sinking may have been slow, happening over centuries, or it may have been sudden, triggered by a major earthquake. We do not know exactly how it happened, but we know that it did happen. The city is there, under the water, waiting to be understood. Dwarka is not the only sunken city off the coast of India. In the Gulf of Kambat in 2001, a team of archaeologists from the Indian government announced the discovery of another submerged settlement. Using sonar, they detected what appeared to be a series of structures at depths of up to 40 meters. The site was vast, covering an area of several square kilometers. The archaeologists claimed that the structures were the remains of a civilization that was 9,000 years old, predating any known civilization in the Indian subcontinent. This claim was met with intense skepticism from the archaeological community. The dating of the site was based on wood samples that might have been carried there by currents. The structures seen on the sonar could have been natural formations, Without excavation and careful analysis, it was impossible to say for certain what the site represented. The debate over the Gulf of Combat site continues, a reminder of how difficult it is to study the past when it lies beneath the water. From India, we travel west again. We cross the Arabian Peninsula and the Red Sea. We enter the Mediterranean once more, and there, off the coast of Greece, in the shallow waters of the Peloponnese, we find the oldest known sunken city in the world. This is Pavlopetri. Pavlopetri was discovered in 1967 by a British oceanographer, Nicholas Fleming. He was surveying the coast of Laconia in southern Greece when his instruments detected something unusual on the seafloor. He dove down to investigate, and he found a city. The ruins were remarkably well preserved, with streets and buildings and tombs all clearly visible on the seabed. The water was shallow, only 3 or 4 meters deep, and the site was easily accessible. It was, Fleming realized, a unique archaeological treasure. The site of Pavlopetri dates back to the Bronze Age, around 3,000 years before the Common Era, making it over 5,000 years old. It was occupied for nearly 2,000 years, through the Minoan and Mycenaean periods, until it was finally abandoned around 1,000 years before the Common Era. The city was a center of trade, located on a strategic point on the coast. It had streets and buildings and a complex water management system. It was a thriving community for almost 2 millennia. What makes Pavlopetri so remarkable is its state of preservation. Because the site is underwater, it was never built over by later civilizations. The streets of the city are still visible, laid out in a grid pattern. The foundations of the buildings are still in place. The tombs are still intact. The city is frozen in time, a snapshot of Bronze Age urban life. You can see the layout of the city, the way the houses were arranged, the way the streets connected the different parts of the settlement. You can see the water management system, the channels and the cisterns that the inhabitants used to collect and distribute water. In 2009, a team of archaeologists from the University of Nottingham conducted a detailed survey of the site. They used digital photography and sonar to create a 3-dimensional map of the sunken city. They collected artifacts and studied the structures. They discovered new buildings and new streets, expanding their understanding of the city. The survey revealed that Pavlopetri was larger and more complex than previously thought. It was a planned city with a sophisticated layout. The archaeologists found evidence of public buildings, of workshops, of storage areas. They found pottery from all over the Mediterranean, showing that the city was connected to a vast network of trade. The archaeologists also found evidence of how the city sank. The coast of Greece is tectonically active, and the region has experienced earthquakes and changes in sea level over the centuries. The city of Pavlopetri was gradually submerged as the land sank and the sea rose. The process was slow, probably happening over hundreds of years. The inhabitants of the city had time to leave, taking their belongings with them. They abandoned their homes to the rising water. Walking through the streets of Pavlopetri today, if you are a diver, is an extraordinary experience. You swim over the walls of houses that were built 5,000 years ago. You float above the streets where people walked and traded and lived their lives. You see the stones that they cut and placed, the foundations of their homes, the tombs where they buried their dead. The city is silent now, but it is not empty. It is full of the presence of the past. The water that covers it is clear and still, and the sunlight filters down through the surface, casting shifting patterns on the ancient stones. Pavlopetri is a powerful reminder of how much of our history lies beneath the water. The sea levels have risen dramatically since the end of the last ice age, around 12,000 years ago. The coastlines of the world were very different then. Large areas of land that are now underwater were once dry, inhabited by human beings. The rising sea covered their homes and their fields and their cities. The evidence of their existence is down there, beneath the waves, waiting to be discovered. We move now to the Caribbean, to the island of Jamaica, to a place that was once known as the wickedest city on earth. This is Port Royal. Port Royal was a city of pirates and privateers, a haven for the buccaneers who terrorized the Spanish Main. It was a city of wealth and vice and violence. In the 17th century, it was the most important English port in the Caribbean, the headquarters of the Royal Navy in the region, and the center of a vast network of trade and piracy. Port Royal was built on a narrow spit of sand at the entrance to Kingston Harbor. It was a precarious location, geologically unstable. The city was built on a sandbar that was barely above sea level, and the buildings were constructed without solid foundations. But this did not matter to the inhabitants of Port Royal. They were too busy making money, spending money, and enjoying the pleasures of the city. The streets were lined with taverns and brothels and gambling houses. The harbor was filled with ships from all over the world. The warehouses were stacked with goods, some legal and some not. The city was a place of excess, where fortunes were made and lost in a single night. On the morning of June 7, 1692, at approximately 11:43 a.m., the earth began to shake. The earthquake lasted only a few minutes, but it was devastating. The sand beneath the city liquefied, a process known as liquefaction, where water-saturated sediment loses its strength and behaves like a liquid. The buildings of Port Royal slid into the sea. Entire blocks of houses collapsed into the water. Ships in the harbor were thrown onto the land. Thousands of people were killed, either crushed by falling buildings or drowned by the sudden inrush of the sea. When the earthquake was over, 2/3 of the city was underwater. The remaining buildings were damaged beyond repair. Port Royal was never rebuilt. The survivors moved across the harbor to Kingston, which became the new capital of Jamaica, and the sunken part of Port Royal was left to the sea. For 300 years, the sunken city lay beneath the water, preserved by the mud and the lack of oxygen. In the 1950s and 1960s, treasure hunters began to explore the site, looking for gold and silver. They found artifacts, but they also damaged the site. In the 1980s, the government of Jamaica established the Port Royal Archaeological Project, a systematic effort to study and preserve the sunken city. What the archaeologists found was remarkable. The city was incredibly well preserved. Because it sank so suddenly, in a matter of minutes, many of the artifacts were left exactly where they had been used. The archaeologists found pewter plates still on tables. They found cooking pots still in hearths. They found bottles of wine still in cellars. They found the remains of meals, of everyday life, of a city that had been frozen in an instant. The suddenness of the disaster preserved a moment in time, a snapshot of 17th century life that is unmatched anywhere in the world. The artifacts from Port Royal provide a vivid picture of life in a 17th century Caribbean port. They found clay pipes, imported from Holland. They found Chinese porcelain, imported from the Far East. They found glass beads from Venice. They found coins from Spain, England, France, and the Netherlands. They found the tools of trades, the weapons of defense, the ornaments of fashion. They found religious objects from the churches of the city. They found the remains of the taverns and the brothels and the warehouses that made Port Royal famous. They found the personal belongings of the inhabitants, the combs and the buttons and the buckles that they used in their daily lives. Port Royal is not just a sunken city. It is a time capsule. It is a window into a specific moment in history, preserved by the accident of a catastrophic earthquake. The scientists studying the site have learned more about life in the 17th century Caribbean from Port Royal than from any other source. They have learned about the food people ate, the clothes they wore, the tools they used, the goods they traded. They have learned about the social structure of the city, the distribution of wealth, the patterns of daily life. The geology of Port Royal explains why it sank. The sandbar on which the city was built was waterlogged. The earthquake caused the sand grains to rearrange themselves, losing their structural integrity. The ground turned to liquid, and the buildings sank into it. This is a process that scientists have studied extensively since the 1692 earthquake. Understanding the liquefaction of sand has helped engineers design buildings that are more resistant to earthquakes. Port Royal, in its destruction, taught us lessons that have saved countless lives. The sunken city of Port Royal is still there. It is a protected site, and visitors can dive to see the remains. The streets are still visible, lined with the ruins of buildings. The walls of brick and stone still stand, in many places, up to the level of the first floor. The site is a haunting place, a reminder of the power of nature and the fragility of human ambition. It is also a reminder of the transience of wealth and power. Port Royal was one of the richest cities in the world, and in a few minutes it was destroyed. The sea claimed it, and the sea holds it still. We return to the Mediterranean now, to the Bay of Naples in Italy, to a place of luxury and pleasure, of emperors and poets. This is Baiae. Baiae was a resort city of the Roman Empire. a place where the wealthy and powerful came to escape the heat of Rome and to enjoy the thermal baths that gave the city its fame. The city was built on the coast, with villas and temples and bathhouses, all designed to take advantage of the natural hot springs. The city was famous for its hedonistic lifestyle. The poet Seneca, who was not impressed by the city, wrote that the place was a vortex of luxury and vice. The city was a place of parties and banquets and intrigues. It was where Julius Caesar had a villa, where Nero plotted, where Cleopatra visited. It was the playground of the Roman elite. The villas of Baiae were among the most luxurious in the Roman world, with marble floors and frescoed walls and gardens that overlooked the sea. But the geology of the region was unstable. The Bay of Naples sits on a volcanic area with the supervolcano Campi Flegrae, the Phlegraean fields, lying beneath the surface. The ground in this area rises and falls over time, a process known as bradyseism. When magma moves beneath the surface, the ground above it rises. When the magma chamber contracts, the ground sinks. Over the centuries, the ground around Baiae rose and fell dramatically. By the 3rd century of the Common Era, Baiae was already in decline. The Roman Empire was weakening, and the wealthy no longer had the resources to maintain their luxurious villas. Then the ground began to sink. The slow, steady subsidence of the coast caused the buildings of Baiae to be gradually submerged. By the 8th century, much of the city was underwater. The process was slow and gentle, unlike the sudden destruction of Port Royal. The water rose inch by inch, year by year, until the villas and the temples and the bathhouses were all beneath the waves. The people abandoned Baiae. The ruins above water were quarried for stone. The city below water was forgotten. For centuries, the ruins of Baiae lay beneath the waves, hidden from view. Fishermen knew that there were ruins down there, but they had no idea of the scale or the beauty of what lay beneath. In the 1960s, archaeologists began to explore the underwater remains of Baiae. What they found was extraordinary. The city was surprisingly well preserved. The statues were still in place. The mosaics were still intact. The walls of the villas still stood. The thermal baths, the reason for the city's existence, were still visible, with their marble floors and their heating systems. The water had preserved the city in remarkable detail. The underwater park of Baiae is now a protected marine area, and it is one of the most remarkable archaeological sites in the world. Divers can swim through the remains of the Roman city. They can see the statue of Ulysses, carved from marble, standing on the seabed. They can see the Nymphaeum, a monumental fountain decorated with statues of gods and goddesses. They can see the thermal baths, with their mosaic floors still bright with color after more than 1,000 years underwater. The mosaics depict sea creatures, dolphins, and fish and octopuses, a fitting decoration for a city that now belongs to the sea. The statues of Baiae are particularly remarkable. They were carved from the finest marble and represent the highest achievements of Roman art. The statues of Ulysses, of the god Dionysus, of the goddess Athena, all of them were found underwater, preserved by the sea. They have been raised and restored and are now displayed in museums. But many of them remain on the seabed, where they have rested for over 1,000 years. The decision to leave some statues in place reflects a growing understanding that the underwater context is itself a form of preservation, that the statues belong to the sea as much as they belong to history. Baiae is a reminder that the rising and falling of the land is a constant process. The coastlines of the world are not fixed. They change over time as the earth moves and the sea levels rise. The cities that were built on the coast are vulnerable to these changes. Some of them have been lost, and some of them will be lost in the future. But for now, the ruins of Baiae lie just beneath the surface, a ghost of Roman luxury, waiting in the clear blue water of the Bay of Naples. From the Bay of Naples, we travel south and east along the coast of the Mediterranean, to the coast of modern-day Israel. There, near the city of Caesarea, lies another sunken city, one that tells the story of the ambition and the engineering genius of one of the most famous figures in history. This is Caesarea Maritima, the city built by Herod the Great. Herod was the king of Judea under the Roman Empire, and he was known for his ambitious building projects. Caesarea was his masterpiece. He built the city on the coast, creating an artificial harbor that was one of the largest and most advanced in the Roman world. The harbor was built using a revolutionary technique, using hydraulic concrete that set underwater. The blocks of concrete were massive, weighing as much as 50 tons each. They were lowered into the sea to create a breakwater that protected the harbor from the waves and the currents. The city of Caesarea was a center of trade and culture. It had a theater, a hippodrome, a palace, and a great temple dedicated to the goddess Roma and to the emperor Augustus. The harbor was filled with ships from all over the Mediterranean. The city was a symbol of Herod's power and of the reach of the Roman Empire. But the sea was not kind to Herod's city. The harbor was built on a fault line, and over the centuries, earthquakes and rising sea levels caused the structures to sink and collapse. The breakwaters that Herod had built so carefully began to settle and crack. The harbor silted up. The buildings along the coast began to sink into the water. By the Middle Ages, much of the city was underwater. Today, the sunken harbor of Caesarea is one of the most remarkable underwater archaeological sites in the world. Divers can swim among the ruins of Herod's harbor, exploring the massive concrete blocks that were lowered into the sea 2,000 years ago. They can see the remains of the warehouses and the quays and the temples. They can see the statue of the Emperor Augustus, which once stood in the Great Temple, now lying on the seabed. The underwater excavations at Caesarea have revealed the engineering genius of Herod's builders. The concrete blocks are still intact, still holding their shape, still protecting the harbor after 2,000 years. The study of this concrete has helped modern engineers understand the techniques of Roman construction. The ruins of Caesarea are a reminder that the sea is not just a destroyer of cities. It is also a preserver, holding the works of ancient engineers in its cold embrace. We continue east along the coast of the Mediterranean to the coast of Turkey to a region known as Lycia. There, near the modern town of Kos, lies the sunken city of Kakova. Kakova is not a single city, but a collection of ruins that lie on the coast and in the shallow waters of the Mediterranean. The city was built on the slopes of a hill that descends into the sea, and when the water rose, the lower parts of the city were submerged. The ruins of Kakova are visible from the surface. The walls of the houses, the stairs that once led to the water, the foundations of the buildings, all of these can be seen through the clear water of the Mediterranean. The sunken city is a popular destination for tourists who take boat trips to see the ruins from above. The water is so clear that you can see the details of the ancient city as if you were looking through glass. The city of Kakova was built during the Roman and Byzantine periods. It was a center of trade, located on a sheltered bay that provided a safe harbor for ships. The city had houses, temples, baths, and a church. It was a prosperous community, connected to the trade routes that crossed the Mediterranean. But the coast of Turkey is tectonically active, and the land has been rising and falling for centuries. The ruins of Kakova were submerged by a combination of earthquakes and rising sea levels. The process was gradual, happening over hundreds of years. The inhabitants of the city had time to leave, taking their belongings with them. They abandoned their homes to the rising water. Today, the sunken city of Kakova is a protected archaeological site. Visitors are not allowed to dive on the ruins to protect them from damage, but they can see the city from boats, looking down through the clear water at the remains of a civilization that has been claimed by the sea. The city is a ghost, but a ghost that can still be seen, its walls and its streets still visible in the depths below. We travel east again, to the coast of Israel, near the modern city of Haifa. There, beneath the waters of the Mediterranean, lies another sunken settlement. This one is much older than the others we have visited. It is called Atlit Yam. Atlit Yam is a Neolithic village, built around 7,000 years before the Common Era. It is one of the oldest submerged settlements ever discovered, and it provides a unique window into the world of the first farmers. Atlit Yam was discovered in 1984 by marine archaeologist Ehud Galili while he was surveying the coast for shipwrecks. What he found was a village perfectly preserved beneath the sand and the water. The village covered an area of about 40,000 square meters. It had houses built from stone with floors made of compacted earth. It had wells dug to provide fresh water. It had hearths where the inhabitants cooked their food. It had burial grounds where they laid their dead to rest. The artifacts found at Atlit Yam are extraordinary. The archaeologists found stone tools used for farming and hunting. They found bone tools used for fishing and weaving. They found beads made from shells and stone used for decoration. They found the remains of plants and animals, showing what the inhabitants ate. They found the skeletons of the inhabitants themselves, preserved in the graves. The preservation of organic materials at Atlit Yam is remarkable because the site was covered by sand shortly after it was abandoned, creating conditions that slowed the decay of bones and other organic remains. The skeletons of Atlit Yam tell a fascinating story. They show signs of disease and injury, giving us insights into the health of Neolithic people. One skeleton of a woman shows signs of tuberculosis, one of the earliest known cases of this disease. Another skeleton of a man shows signs of a violent death, perhaps in a conflict with another group. The study of these skeletons has revealed much about the lives and the deaths of the people who lived at Atlit Yam. They were farmers and fishermen, living in a village on the coast, connected to the wider world through trade and migration. The most haunting discovery at Atlit Yam is a circle of stones. This is a stone structure, about 8 meters in diameter, that was built on the edge of the village. The stones are arranged in a circle, with a smaller circle of stones in the center. The structure is oriented towards the north, suggesting that the inhabitants had some knowledge of astronomy. The purpose of this stone circle is not known, but it is likely that it had a ritual or ceremonial function. It was a place where the community gathered, a place of meaning and significance. The stone circle is the oldest known structure of its kind in the world, older than Stonehenge by several thousand years. Atlit Yam was abandoned around 6,000 years before the Common Era, when rising sea levels forced the inhabitants to leave. The village was slowly submerged by the Mediterranean, which rose steadily over the course of several centuries. The inhabitants moved to higher ground, taking their knowledge of farming and fishing with them. Their village was left to the sea, covered first by sand and then by water, preserved for 7,000 years until it was discovered. The story of Atlit Yam is the story of countless settlements around the world. As the last ice age ended and the glaciers melted, the sea levels rose dramatically. The coastlines of the world were reshaped. Low-lying areas were flooded. Entire landscapes disappeared beneath the water. The people who lived in these areas had to adapt or move. Many of them moved, carrying their culture with them. The evidence of their presence, their homes and their tools and their graves, remains beneath the sea. We travel now to the Black Sea, to the coast of Bulgaria and Ukraine and Turkey. This region played a crucial role in the history of Europe and Asia, and the waters of the Black Sea contain a unique archaeological record. The Black Sea was once a freshwater lake, isolated from the Mediterranean by a land bridge at the Bosporus. Around 7,600 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, the rising sea levels caused the Mediterranean to break through this land bridge, flooding the Black Sea basin. The flood was catastrophic. The water rose rapidly, perhaps as much as 15 centimeters per day. The people living around the lake were forced to flee. Their homes and their fields were submerged. The memory of this event may have been preserved in the flood myths that appear in many cultures, including the story of Noah in the Bible. The theory that the Black Sea flood inspired the biblical flood story was proposed by geologists William Ryan and Walter Pittman in the 1990s, and it has been the subject of intense debate ever since. The idea that a real geological event could have inspired a religious myth is not as strange as it sounds. The flood myth appears in many cultures around the world, from the Epic of Gilgamesh in Mesopotamia, to the story of Manu in India, to the flood legends of Native American tribes. The common thread in all of these stories is a great flood that destroys civilization, a flood that only a few people survive. It is possible that all of these stories have their origin in the same event, the flooding of the Black Sea basin, which would have been a catastrophe on a scale that is hard to imagine. The people who lived around the Black Sea lake were farmers and fishermen, living in villages along the shore. When the sea broke through the Bosporus, the water would have risen relentlessly, day after day, week after week. The people would have been forced to flee, carrying their belongings and their children, moving to higher ground as the water rose behind them. The villages that they left behind would have been submerged, one by one, until the entire landscape was underwater. The survivors of the flood would have carried the memory of the disaster with them. They would have told the story to their children and their grandchildren, passing it down through the generations. The story would have changed over time, becoming more symbolic, more mythical. The real event would have become a legend, and the legend would have become a religious story. But at the heart of it all, there would have been a real memory of a real flood, a flood that changed the world. The underwater archaeology of the Black Sea is still in its infancy, but the discoveries made so far suggest that the region is rich in submerged sites. Off the coast of Bulgaria, archaeologists have found the remains of a Bronze Age settlement, with wooden structures preserved by the oxygen-poor waters of the Black Sea. Off the coast of Turkey, they have found the remains of ancient harbors and trading posts. And off the coast of Ukraine, they have found the remains of a Neolithic settlement, similar to Atlit Yam. The unique conditions of the Black Sea make it an ideal environment for the preservation of underwater sites. The deep waters of the Black Sea are anoxic, meaning that they contain no oxygen. This prevents the decay of organic materials. Wood, leather, textiles, and even human remains can survive for thousands of years in these conditions. The potential for discovery in the Black Sea is immense. Imagine a shipwreck from the time of the ancient Greeks, preserved in perfect condition, with the wooden hull intact, the cargo still in place, the personal belongings of the sailors still lying where they left them. Such discoveries are not just possible in the Black Sea. They are waiting to be made. One of the most promising sites is the ancient city of Phanagoria, on the coast of the Taman Peninsula in Russia. Phanagoria was founded by Greek colonists in the 6th century before the Common Era, and it became one of the most important cities in the region. Parts of the city have been submerged by the rising waters of the Black Sea, and underwater excavations have revealed remarkably well-preserved remains. The archaeologists working at Phanagoria have found the remains of walls and buildings, pottery and coins, and the wooden hulls of ancient ships. They have found a marble sarcophagus, carved with scenes from Greek mythology. They have found evidence of a fire that destroyed part of the city in the 1st century before the Common Era, possibly related to the Bosporan Rebellion. The sunken part of Phanagoria is a treasure trove of information about the Greek colonization of the Black Sea region. The artifacts found at the site tell the story of a city that was a crossroads of cultures, where Greek and Scythian and Persian influences mingled. We move now to the north of Europe, to the coast of Germany in the North Sea. There, beneath the waters of the Wadden Sea, lies the sunken city of Rungholt. Rungholt was a prosperous city in the Middle Ages, a center of trade and agriculture. It was built on the coast of what is now the German state of Schleswig-Holstein, in a region that was vulnerable to flooding. On the night of January 16, 1362, a massive storm surge, known as the Grote Mandrenka, the Great Drowning of Men, struck the coast of the North Sea. The storm surge was one of the most catastrophic in European history. It flooded vast areas of land, destroying villages and towns and killing tens of thousands of people. Rungholt was one of the places that was destroyed. The city was submerged by the floodwaters, and it was never rebuilt. For centuries, the exact location of Rungholt was unknown. It was a legend, a city that had been lost to the sea. Then, in the 20th century, archaeologists began to find evidence of the sunken city. They found the remains of fields and drainage systems, of houses and churches. They found the dikes that the inhabitants had built to protect their land from the sea, dikes that had failed on that terrible night in 1362. The most dramatic evidence of Rungholt is the remains of the city's church. The foundations of the church are still visible in the mudflats of the Wadden Sea, exposed at low tide. The church was a large building, suggesting that Rungholt was a wealthy and important city. The remains of the church are a haunting sight, a reminder of the power of the sea and the vulnerability of human settlements on the coast. The story of Rungholt is similar to the story of many settlements on the coast of the North Sea. The region has experienced centuries of storm surges and rising sea levels, and many settlements have been lost. The people who lived there built dikes and dams to protect their land, but the sea was stronger. The sunken cities of the North Sea are a reminder that the battle between land and sea is an ancient one, and that the sea does not always lose. We move to the other side of the world, to China, to the coast of Zhejiang province, where another sunken city waits. This is Xicheng, the Lion City. Xicheng was a city of great beauty, with temples and pagodas and gardens. It was known for its architecture, its art, and its culture. The city was built during the Ming Dynasty around 600 years ago, and it thrived for centuries as a center of trade and administration. In 1959, the Chinese government decided to build a hydroelectric dam on the Xinan River. The dam created a reservoir, Qiandao Lake, which flooded a valley that contained several towns and villages. One of those settlements was Xicheng. The inhabitants of Xicheng were moved to higher ground, and the city was deliberately flooded, submerged beneath the waters of the new lake. For decades, the city lay forgotten beneath the surface of Qiandao Lake. Then, in 2001, a Chinese expedition explored the lake and rediscovered the city. What they found was astonishing. The city was incredibly well preserved. The walls of the buildings were still standing. The wooden beams of the roofs were still intact. The carvings and the statues were still visible. The water of the lake had preserved the city, protecting it from the decay that would have occurred above water. Today, Xicheng is a popular destination for divers. They can swim through the streets of the city, exploring the temples and the pagodas and the houses. They can see the stone lions that gave the city its name. They can see the arches and the bridges and the gardens. The city is a ghost, frozen in time, a memorial to a way of life that has disappeared. The story of Xicheng is unusual because we know exactly when and how it was submerged. It was not lost by accident or by natural disaster. It was sacrificed for the sake of progress, for the electricity that the dam would provide. The city was deliberately flooded, and the people who lived there were moved to new homes. It is a sunken city of the modern age, a reminder that the process of submersion continues. The cities that are being submerged today, for dams or by rising sea levels, will be the sunken cities of the future, studied by archaeologists of the distant future. Xicheng is a bridge between the past and the future, a sunken city that belongs to our own time. From China, we travel to the Pacific Ocean. We travel to the islands of Micronesia, to a place that is one of the most mysterious and remarkable archaeological sites in the world. This is Nan Madol. Nan Madol is not entirely submerged. It is a city built on a series of artificial islands connected by canals on the eastern shore of the island of Pohnpei. It has been called the Venice of the Pacific, but it is stranger and more mysterious than any city in Europe. Nan Madol was built between the 12th and the 17th centuries of the Common Era by the Sodeleur dynasty, the rulers of Pohnpei. The city was constructed from massive basalt columns, some weighing as much as 50 tons. These columns were transported from quarries on the other side of the island and then placed in position, forming the walls and the foundations of the city. The scale of the construction is staggering. The city covers an area of about 75 hectares, and the walls of the buildings are up to 8 meters high. The city was built on the coast, and the sea has always been a part of its existence. The canals that run through the city are filled with seawater, and the buildings are constantly exposed to the salt and the waves. Over the centuries, the sea has begun to claim parts of Nan Madol. The outer walls of the city, the structures that face the open ocean, have been eroded and damaged by the constant action of the waves. Some structures have collapsed into the water, others are partially submerged, their lower levels filled with seawater. The rising sea levels of the modern era are accelerating the destruction of Nan Madol. The city is already at sea level, and as the ocean rises, more and more of the structures will be submerged. The sea that once protected Nan Madol, providing transportation and food and defense, is now threatening to destroy it. The city is slowly being reclaimed by the ocean, becoming a sunken city before our eyes. Nan Madol is a reminder that the process of submersion is not just a thing of the past, it is happening today. The cities that were built on the coast, by civilizations that thrived on their connection to the sea, are now being claimed by the sea. The sunken cities of the future are being built today. From Micronesia, we continue our journey across the Pacific to the waters of the Bahamas. There, in the shallow waters near the island of Bimini, lies one of the most controversial submerged formations in the world. This is the Bimini Road. The Bimini Road is a formation of limestone blocks, arranged in a line that runs for about half a kilometer along the seafloor. The blocks are rectangular, about 4 meters long and 3 meters wide, and they appear to be arranged in a regular pattern, like a road or a wall. The Bimini Road was discovered in 1968 by a team of divers who were exploring the waters of the Bahamas. The formation immediately attracted attention because it looked like a man-made structure, a road or a wall that had been submerged by the rising sea. Some researchers argued that the Bimini Road was the remains of a lost civilization, possibly the legendary Atlantis itself. The formation became a focus of the search for the lost city, a symbol of the possibility that the ancient world harbored civilizations that were more advanced than we assume. But the scientific consensus on the Bimini Road is that it is a natural formation. Geologists have studied the blocks and concluded that they are the result of natural processes. the erosion of the limestone bedrock by the action of waves and currents. The blocks are made of a type of limestone called beach rock, which forms in layers along the shoreline. When the layers crack and break apart, they create blocks that appear to be cut and shaped by human hands, but are in fact entirely natural. The debate over the Bimini Road is similar to the debate over the Yonaguni Monument. Both formations appear to be man-made, but both are most likely natural. The human mind is wired to see patterns, to recognize faces and shapes in random arrangements. When we see a formation that looks like a road, we want to believe that it was built by human hands. But sometimes nature is capable of creating forms that look like the work of humans. The deep holds its secrets well, and sometimes the secrets it holds are that the mysteries are not as mysterious as we think. This tendency to see patterns is called pareidolia. It is the same phenomenon that makes us see faces in clouds, animals in constellations, and shapes in rock formations. It is a survival mechanism, a way of making sense of the world by finding patterns in chaos. But it can also lead us astray, causing us to see things that are not there. The search for sunken cities is full of pareidolia, of false positives, of formations that look like walls and streets, but are actually natural. The challenge of underwater archaeology is to distinguish between the real and the imagined, between the human and the natural. And sometimes the distinction is not clear. The Yonaguni Monument and the Bimini Road are both ambiguous. They could be natural. They could be human-made. They could be both. The uncertainty is part of what makes them fascinating. The deep does not give up its secrets easily. It keeps us guessing, keeps us wondering, keeps us searching. From the Bahamas, we travel back across the Atlantic to the Mediterranean once more, to the coast of Italy, to the city of Herculaneum. Herculaneum was destroyed by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 of the Common Era, along with Pompeii. But unlike Pompeii, which was buried by ash and pumice, Herculaneum was buried by pyroclastic flows, which preserved the city in remarkable detail. The city was buried under about 20 meters of volcanic material, which protected it from the elements. But part of Herculaneum lies beneath the sea. The coastline of the Bay of Naples has changed since the time of the Roman Empire, and the waterfront of Herculaneum, the area where the fishermen and the merchants had their workshops, is now underwater. The Villa of the Papyri, one of the most famous buildings in Herculaneum, is partially submerged. The villa was a luxurious residence, named for the library of papyrus scrolls that was found there. The villa had a garden, a bathhouse, and a private harbor, and parts of the villa now lie beneath the water. The submerged section of Herculaneum is another example of the complex relationship between human civilization and the sea. The same sea that brought trade and prosperity to the cities of the Bay of Naples also contributed to their destruction and their submersion. The same volcano that destroyed Herculaneum with fire and ash also preserved it for future generations. The submerged ruins of Herculaneum are a reminder that the forces of nature are complex and unpredictable, and that the fate of human cities is never certain. From the Bay of Naples, we travel far to the east, across the Mediterranean and Asia, to the waters around Japan. There, near the coast of the island of Yonaguni, lies one of the most controversial underwater sites in the world. This is the Yonaguni Monument. The monument was discovered in 1987 by a diver named Kihachiro Aratake, who was looking for hammerhead sharks. What he found was a massive rock formation with terraces and steps and pillars that looked, to many people, like the remains of a human-built structure. The Yonaguni Monument is a large formation of sandstone and mudstone, carved by the action of water and tectonic forces over millions of years. It sits in about 25 meters of water off the coast of Yonaguni Island. The formation is about 100 meters long and 50 meters wide, and it rises from the seafloor in a series of terraces and platforms. The controversy over Yonaguni is one of the most intense debates in underwater archaeology. On one side are those who believe that the formation is entirely natural, a product of the geological processes that shape the seafloor. On the other side are those who believe that the formation is a man-made structure, the remains of a lost civilization that existed thousands of years ago. The proponents of the natural formation theory point out that sandstone and mudstone naturally fracture along horizontal and vertical planes, creating the appearance of steps and terraces. The currents and the waves of the Pacific have eroded the rock, creating the shapes that we see today. The region is tectonically active, and the earthquakes that regularly shake the area have caused the rock to crack and shift, creating the appearance of walls and pillars. They also point out that similar formations can be found in other parts of the world where there is no question of human involvement. The proponents of the man-made theory point out several features that they believe cannot be explained by natural processes. The formation has a straight edge, a line that runs along its length with remarkable precision. It has a series of steps, evenly spaced and parallel, that look like a staircase. It has a platform with a central depression, which some believe is a pool or a cistern. It has a formation that looks like a face, carved into the rock. They argue that the precision and the symmetry of these features are beyond what natural erosion can achieve. The debate over Yonaguni has been going on for over 30 years, and there is no consensus in sight. The mainstream scientific community, for the most part, accepts the natural formation theory. Geologists who have studied the site point out that the formations are consistent with the natural erosion patterns of sandstone. The straight lines and the parallel steps, they argue, are the result of natural fractures in the rock, not the work of human hands. But the alternative theory persists. The advocates of the man-made theory include some respected researchers, such as Robert Schoch, a professor of geology at Boston University, who initially believed the formation was natural but later changed his mind after studying it in person. Schoch has argued that some of the features of the Yonaguni monument are too precise and too symmetrical to be the result of natural erosion. He has also pointed out that the formation shows signs of tool marks, though this claim is disputed. The mystery of Yonaguni is unlikely to be resolved anytime soon. There is no definitive evidence either way. The site has not been excavated in the way that a conventional archaeological site would be excavated. The underwater environment makes it difficult to study, and the lack of artifacts, of tools or pottery or inscriptions, makes it hard to prove that the site was built by human beings. The Yonaguni monument remains one of the great enigmas of the underwater world, a puzzle that continues to fascinate and frustrate those who seek to understand it. Perhaps the Yonaguni monument is natural, perhaps it is man-made, or perhaps it is a combination of both, a natural formation that was modified by human hands. We may never know for certain, and that, in a way, is part of the mystery. The deep holds its secrets well. We return to the Mediterranean one more time. To the coast of Egypt, to the city of Alexandria. Alexandria was one of the greatest cities of the ancient world, founded by Alexander the Great in 331 before the Common Era. It was a center of learning and culture, home to the Great Library and the Pharos Lighthouse, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. For centuries, Alexandria was the intellectual capital of the Mediterranean world, but parts of Alexandria have been lost to the sea. The city was built on the coast, and over the centuries, earthquakes and rising sea levels have caused much of the ancient city to sink beneath the water. The remains of the royal quarter, the palaces of the Ptolemies, the temples and the harbors, all of these are now underwater. The underwater archaeology of Alexandria began in the 1990s, when Frank Gorio, the same archaeologist who discovered Thonis Heracleion, turned his attention to the waters of Alexandria. What he found was a vast underwater landscape covered with the remains of the ancient city. The excavators found colossal statues, including a statue of a Ptolemaic queen and a statue of the god Hapi. They found sphinxes carved from red granite. They found the remains of the royal palace, with its marble floors and its columns. They found the remains of the Pharos Lighthouse, fallen into the sea after the earthquakes that destroyed it. The most dramatic discovery was the remains of the royal quarter, the area of the city where the Ptolemies had their palaces. The ruins were scattered over a large area, covered with sediment and marine growth. The excavators found the foundations of buildings, the columns of temples, the statues of gods and kings. They found the remains of the harbor, with its quays and its docks. They found the remains of ships that had sunk in the harbor, still loaded with their cargoes. The statues found in the waters of Alexandria are among the finest examples of Hellenistic art. There is a statue of a Ptolemaic queen, possibly Cleopatra, carved from diorite. There is a statue of the god Serapis, with his distinctive beard and his basket of grain. There is a statue of Isis, the Egyptian goddess, carved in the Greek style. These statues were part of the decoration of the royal palace, symbols of the power and the wealth of the Ptolemaic dynasty. The underwater sites of Alexandria are a reminder that the great cities of the ancient world were often built on the coast. They were ports, centers of trade, gateways to the interior. And because they were built on the coast, they were vulnerable to the changes of the sea. The sea that brought them wealth and power could also take it away. We step back now to look at the bigger picture. The sunken cities of the world are not isolated accidents. They are not random events scattered across the globe without connection. They are the result of global processes, forces that have shaped the history of our planet and our species. The most important of these processes is the change in sea level. Throughout the history of the Earth, the sea levels have risen and fallen dramatically. During the ice ages, when enormous glaciers covered large parts of the continents, the sea levels were much lower than they are today. The water that formed the glaciers came from the ocean. So when the glaciers were at their maximum extent, the sea levels were as much as 120 meters lower than they are now. At that time, the coastlines of the world were very different. The North Sea was a plain with rivers and forests and animals. The English Channel was dry land. The Bering Strait was a land bridge connecting Asia and North America. The Persian Gulf was a valley. The coast of India extended far beyond its current limits. The islands of Indonesia were connected to the mainland. The Mediterranean was smaller, with vast areas of dry land where the sea now lies. These vast areas of land, now underwater, were inhabited by human beings. They were home to communities of hunters and gatherers, farmers and fishermen. They were the sites of settlements and cities. And when the ice melted, when the sea levels rose, these areas were flooded. The people who lived there moved to higher ground, leaving their homes and their settlements to the rising water. The rise in sea level was not steady. It came in pulses, rapid periods of flooding followed by periods of stability. The most dramatic of these pulses happened around 14,000 years ago, when the sea level rose by about 20 meters in just a few centuries. This would have been a catastrophic event for the people living on the coast. Their homes, their fields, their entire world would have been submerged in the span of a few generations. This event, known as Meltwater Pulse 1A, was caused by the collapse of the ice sheets in North America and Europe. The massive release of fresh water into the ocean caused the sea level to rise rapidly. The effects were felt around the world. The coastlines were redrawn. The landscapes of the last ice age were drowned. The rising sea levels of the last 12,000 years are the primary reason why we have so many sunken cities. The cities that were built on the coast, near the ports and the harbors, were vulnerable to the rising water. As the sea crept higher, the cities had to be abandoned. Some of them were gradually submerged over centuries. Others were overwhelmed more quickly by earthquakes or tsunamis. The preservation of these submerged sites depends on the conditions of the water. In some cases, as in the Black Sea, the lack of oxygen preserves organic materials. In other cases, as in Pavlopetri, the shallow water and the sediment protect the structures from destruction. In still other cases, as in Port Royal, the suddenness of the submersion preserves the artifacts in their original positions. Each sunken city has its own story, not just of its rise and fall, but of its preservation and its rediscovery. There are likely many more sunken cities waiting to be discovered. The continental shelves of the world, the shallow areas of the ocean floor that were once dry land, cover an area of about 27 million square kilometers. This is an area roughly the size of Africa. Much of this area was inhabited by human beings during the last ice age. The evidence of their presence, their settlements, their tools, their art lies beneath the water. The archaeology of the continental shelves is still in its early stages. The techniques for surveying and excavating underwater sites are improving, but they are still limited. The cost of underwater archaeology is high, and the number of trained underwater archaeologists is small. The majority of the submerged landscape remains unexplored. We have barely scratched the surface of what lies beneath. The methods that underwater archaeologists use are fascinating in their own right. Surveying a seafloor site requires a combination of sonar technology, satellite positioning, and manual exploration. Side-scan sonar sends out sound waves that bounce off the seafloor, creating an image of the topography and the structures that lie on it. Sub-bottom profilers use sound waves that penetrate the sediment, revealing structures that are buried beneath the seafloor. Magnetometers detect the magnetic signature of objects on the seafloor, such as metal artifacts or stone structures. Once a site has been identified, the next step is to excavate it. Underwater excavation is a slow and painstaking process. The archaeologists work in diving teams, using airlifts and water dredges to remove the sediment that covers the structures. The sediment that is removed is filtered through a screen to catch any small artifacts that might be present. The artifacts are then recorded and preserved, using techniques that are adapted to the underwater environment. The preservation of artifacts from underwater sites is a particular challenge. Objects that have been submerged for centuries or millennia have adapted to the underwater environment. When they are brought to the surface, they can deteriorate rapidly. Wood that has been waterlogged for centuries can crack and warp as it dries. Metal that has been encrusted with marine growth can corrode when exposed to air. The process of conserving underwater artifacts requires specialized knowledge and facilities. Despite these challenges, the rewards of underwater archaeology are immense. A single sunken city can reveal more about the past than decades of excavation on land. The preservation of organic materials, the clarity of the site plan, the abundance of artifacts, all of these make underwater sites uniquely valuable to archaeologists. The search for sunken cities is also being transformed by new technologies. Autonomous underwater vehicles can survey large areas of the seafloor without the need for a human operator. Remote sensing satellites can identify changes in the seafloor from space. Genetic analysis of sediment samples can reveal the presence of human activity in a submerged landscape. The tools that we have for exploring the underwater world are becoming more powerful and more sophisticated with each passing year. But the fundamental challenge remains. The ocean is vast, and our ability to explore it is limited. The majority of the seafloor has never been seen by human eyes. The sunken cities that lie in the deep are waiting for us to find them, but they are patient. They have been waiting for centuries. They can wait a little longer. What might we find when we finally explore these drowned lands? We might find the remains of cities that are older than any we know. We might find evidence of civilizations that flourished during the Ice Age when the sea levels were low and the continents were larger. We might find the answers to some of the deepest questions about human history. One of the most intriguing theories about sunken civilizations is the idea that there might have been a lost civilization that existed before the rise of the ancient Egyptians and the Sumerians. This theory is associated with the name of Graham Hancock, a British author who has written extensively about the possibility of a lost Ice Age civilization. Hancock argues that the myths of flood and destruction that appear in many cultures are memories of a real historical event, the flooding of a lost civilization at the end of the last Ice Age. Most mainstream archaeologists are skeptical of Hancock's theories. They point out that there is no archaeological evidence for a lost Ice Age civilization. The stone tools and the cave paintings that we have from the Ice Age suggest that humans lived in small bands, not in large urban centers. The technological achievements that Hancock attributes to his lost civilization, such as advanced astronomy and monumental architecture, are not supported by the archaeological record. But the skepticism of the mainstream does not mean that the search is not worthwhile. The continental shelves are a largely unexplored frontier. We do not know what we will find when we finally begin to explore them systematically. The potential for discovery is enormous. The history of archaeology is full of discoveries that were dismissed as impossible before they were made. The city of Troy was a legend until Heinrich Schliemann found it. Thonis Heracleion was a legend until Frank Gaudio found it. The deep holds many secrets, and it reveals them slowly. Consider the example of Doggerland. Doggerland was the name given to the area of the North Sea that was dry land during the last Ice Age. It connected Britain to the continent of Europe. It was a landscape of rivers and forests and marshes, inhabited by animals and human beings. When the sea rose at the end of the Ice Age, Doggerland was slowly flooded. The inhabitants moved to higher ground, and their land was submerged. In recent years, geologists and archaeologists have begun to study Doggerland in detail. Using seismic surveys and sediment cores, they have mapped the ancient landscape. They have found the remains of rivers and lakes and forests. They have found the bones of animals, including mammoths and rhinoceroses and giant deer. They have found the tools and the weapons of the people who lived there. The picture that is emerging is of a rich and complex landscape, a lost world that is only now being rediscovered. The potential of Doggerland is immense. The sediments of the North Sea have preserved the remains of the people and the animals and the plants of the Ice Age in remarkable detail. The study of Doggerland is already changing our understanding of the early history of Europe. And Doggerland is just one of many submerged landscapes around the world. There are submerged landscapes in the Persian Gulf, where the fertile valley that was once the confluence of the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers is now underwater. This valley, which has been called the Garden of Eden by some scholars, may hold the remains of the earliest human civilizations in the region, civilizations that were drowned by the rising sea before they could be recorded by history. There are submerged landscapes in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. where the rising sea flooded vast networks of limestone caves. These caves, known as cenotes, were dry during the last ice age, and they were used by human beings as sources of fresh water and as places of ritual. The remains of early American peoples have been found in these caves, preserved by the unique conditions of the underwater environment. The skeletons of Ice Age hunters, the bones of extinct animals, the traces of the first peoples to inhabit the Americas, all of these have been found in the flooded caves of the Yucatan. The cave of Hoyo Negro, for example, contains the skeleton of a teenage girl who lived about 13,000 years ago, one of the oldest human remains ever found in the Americas. The cave was dry when she fell into it, and the sea rose over the following millennia, sealing her remains in an underwater tomb. On the coast of Quintana Roo in Mexico, there lies another kind of sunken settlement. The ancient Maya city of Muyil was built along a lagoon system that connected the coast to the interior. The city flourished for centuries, a center of trade and culture in the Maya world. But as the sea levels rose and the land shifted, parts of Muyil were submerged. The remains of the city's port and some of its structures now lie beneath the waters of the lagoon, preserved in the calm, clear water. The sunken structures of Muyil are a reminder that the sunken cities of the world are not limited to any one region or civilization. Every inhabited coast has its own story of loss and submersion. The Maya, who built their cities in the dense jungles of Central America, also built along the coast, and their coastal settlements were just as vulnerable to the rising sea as the cities of Egypt and Greece and India. The sunken cities of the Maya world are still being discovered. The jungles of Central America hide many ruins, and the waters off the coast hide many more. The search for these sunken cities is part of a larger search for understanding, for the story of human civilization in all its diversity and complexity. Every sunken city that is found adds a new piece to the puzzle, a new chapter to the story. There are submerged landscapes in South America, in the high Andes of Peru and Bolivia. The waters of Lake Titicaca, the highest navigable lake in the world, contain the remains of a lost civilization. In 2000, a team of archaeologists led by the Italian researcher Lorenzo Epis discovered a submerged temple on the floor of Lake Titicaca. The temple was built by the Tiwanaku civilization, which flourished in the region between 500 and 1000 of the Common Era. The temple was submerged by the rising waters of the lake, which have risen and fallen over the centuries due to changes in the climate. The Temple of Lake Titicaca is a reminder that the sunken cities of the world are not limited to the oceans. The lakes and the rivers of the world also hold submerged ruins, the remains of civilizations that were flooded by changes in the water level. The search for sunken cities is a search that extends across the entire planet, from the deepest oceans to the highest lakes. There are submerged landscapes in the Mediterranean, around the islands of Greece and Crete. The waters off the coast of Crete contain the remains of the Minoan civilization, the first advanced civilization in Europe. The Minoans built ports and palaces and cities along the coast, and many of these have been submerged by the rising sea. The ancient city of Elus on the island of Crete was a thriving port during the Greek and Roman periods. The city was gradually submerged by a combination of tectonic subsidence and rising sea levels. The ruins of Elus are now underwater, visible to divers who explore the clear waters of the Cretan coast. There are submerged landscapes all over the world. The floor of the ocean is covered with the remains of human activity, from the earliest settlements to the modern era. Every coast in the world has its own submerged history, a history that is only now beginning to be explored. There are submerged landscapes in Southeast Asia, where the Sunda Shelf, the continental shelf that connects the islands of Indonesia, was once dry land. The rising sea that flooded this shelf may have driven the migration of peoples across the region, shaping the cultural landscape of modern Southeast Asia. There are submerged landscapes in Australia, off the coast of the continent, where the rising sea flooded the ancient plains that connected Australia to Papua New Guinea and Tasmania. All of these submerged landscapes were inhabited by human beings. The people who lived there had cultures and languages and traditions. They built homes and tools and boats. They traded and fought and loved. Their world was submerged by the rising sea, and their story is only now beginning to be told. The search for sunken cities is not just about finding spectacular ruins. It is about understanding the history of our species. It is about connecting with the people who came before us, who faced the same challenges that we face. The rising sea is not just a thing of the past. It is happening today. The sea levels are rising again as the climate of the planet changes. The cities that we build on the coast today may one day be the sunken cities of the future. The archaeologists of the future may study our cities as we study the cities of the past, diving down through the water to explore the ruins of our own civilization. There is a special quality to the silence of a sunken city. It is not the same as the silence of a desert or a forest. It is a different kind of silence, a silence that is pressed and dense and full of weight. The water above absorbs the sounds of the surface, muffling them, muting them, turning them into distant echoes. The only sounds are the sounds of the water itself, the currents and the bubbles, and the gentle movement of the sea. It is a silence that is full of presence. In this silence, the past feels closer. The stones of the sunken cities are not just stones. They are the remains of human lives, of human hopes and human fears. They were placed there by hands that are now dust, by people who lived and loved and died, who worked and prayed and dreamed. The water that covers them is a kind of time, separating them from us, preserving them in a different world. When we visit a sunken city, we are not just looking at stones. We are looking at the traces of lives that were lived thousands of years ago. We cannot walk through these cities as we walk through the ruins above ground. We cannot touch the stones with our feet or see the carvings in the sunlight. We must visit them as divers, as guests in an alien environment. We must move through the water, breathing through tubes, seeing through masks. The cities are not ours to possess. They belong to the sea now. And there is something appropriate about this. The sea has claimed them, and the sea holds them in its embrace. And perhaps that is fitting. The sea is a great preserver. It takes the works of human hands and holds them in its cold embrace, protecting them from the wear and tear of the surface world. The sunken cities are not destroyed. They are preserved, waiting. They are waiting for the time when they will be discovered, when they will tell their stories to the world above. But not all of them will be found. Some of them are too deep. Some of them are too buried. Some of them have been destroyed by the very forces that submerged them. The sunken cities that we have found are only a fraction of what lies beneath. There are more waiting, hidden in the darkness, their stones covered with silt, their streets empty of life. The deep holds its secrets close. The stories of sunken cities appear in the mythology of cultures around the world. The flood myth is one of the most universal stories in human culture, appearing in the traditions of Mesopotamia, India, China, Greece, the Americas, and the Pacific Islands. The consistency of these stories across cultures that had no contact with each other suggests that they may be based on real events, real floods that submerged real cities. The geological record confirms that such floods happened. The end of the last ice age was a time of rising seas and catastrophic floods. The people who lived through those floods would have carried the memory of them into the future, passing them down through generations until they became the myths that we know today. The search for sunken cities is not just a search for physical ruins. It is a search for the truth behind the myths, for the historical events that gave rise to the stories that have shaped human culture. When we find a sunken city, we are not just finding stones and artifacts. We are finding the evidence of events that have echoed through human history for thousands of years. The myths are not just stories, they are memories. The flood that destroyed Helik, the earthquake that sank Port Royal, the rising sea that submerged Atlit Yam, these events were real. They happened, and the memory of them has been carried forward through the centuries, preserved in the stories that we tell about the past. Every sunken city that we discover confirms that the past is not lost. It is still there, beneath the water, beneath the sediment, beneath the centuries. The stones of the sunken cities are still standing. The artifacts of the sunken cities are still intact. The stories of the sunken cities are still waiting to be told. The deep is a repository of memory, a library of human experience, a sanctuary of the past. Every sunken city is a volume in this library. Every artifact is a sentence. Every stone is a word in the story of our species. The library is vast, and we have only begun to read it. The search for sunken cities is a search for ourselves. It is a search for the origins of our civilization, for the roots of our culture. It is a search for the stories that have been lost, the voices that have been silenced by the rising water. And it is a search that will continue, as long as there are people who look at the sea and wonder what lies beneath. Every sunken city that is discovered changes our understanding of the past. It adds a new chapter to the story of our species. It reminds us that the history of humanity is not a simple story of progress, but a complex web of triumphs and failures, of gains and losses. The cities that sank were not necessarily less advanced than the cities that survived. They were just unlucky. They were built in the wrong place at the wrong time. Their fate was determined by the forces of geology and climate, not by the quality of their civilization. The same forces are at work today. The cities that we build on the coast are vulnerable to the same processes that submerged the cities of the past. The rising sea does not care about our technology or our wealth. It rises at its own pace, driven by the same geological and climatic forces that have shaped the surface of the earth for billions of years. The sunken cities of the past are a warning, but they are also a guide. They show us what happens when the sea rises. They show us how people respond. They show us what is possible. The search for sunken cities is also a search for wisdom. The people who built the cities that were lost to the sea were not fools. They built their cities on the coast because that was where the resources were. That was where the trade routes were. That was where the fishing was good. They understood the risks, but they accepted them because the benefits were worth it. They were not naive. They were practical. The same calculation is made by every civilization that builds on the coast. The benefits of coastal living are obvious. The sea provides food, transportation, trade, and defense. The coast is where the action is. But the risks are also obvious. The sea can rise. The ground can shake. The storms can come. Every coastal civilization must balance these risks and benefits. The sunken cities are the record of civilizations that made that calculation and lost. But they are also the record of civilizations that, for centuries or millennia, made that calculation and won. The sunken cities teach us about the relationship between human beings and the natural world. They show us that we are not masters of the earth. We are part of it. The forces of geology and climate are more powerful than any human civilization. The cities that we build are temporary, fragile, vulnerable. But this does not mean that they are meaningless. The meaning of a city is not in its permanence. It is in the lives that are lived within it, the relationships that are formed, the culture that is created. The sunken cities are full of meaning, even though they are empty of people. The artifacts that are found in sunken cities are not just objects, they are the remains of human lives. A pottery jar is not just a container, it is the vessel that someone used to store their food. A coin is not just a piece of metal, it is the money that someone used to buy their goods. A statue is not just a work of art, it is the image of a god that someone worshipped. Every artifact in a sunken city is a connection to a real person, a real life, a real story. The archaeologists who study these artifacts are not just studying objects, they are studying people. Consider the simple clay pipe found in Port Royal. It was made in Holland, shipped across the Atlantic, and smoked by a sailor or a merchant in a tavern in the wickedest city on earth. The pipe was used, held in someone's hand, touched to someone's lips. It was dropped or set down when the earthquake struck, and it lay on the floor of the tavern for 300 years until an archaeologist found it. The pipe is not just an artifact. It is a connection to a real person, a real moment in time, a real life. Consider the stone anchor found in the waters of Dwarka. It was carved by a craftsman, used by a sailor, dropped into the sea when the ship arrived in the harbor. The anchor held the ship in place while the crew unloaded their cargo and traded with the merchants of the city. It was left behind when the city sank, buried under the sediment of the Gulf of Combat. The anchor is not just a stone, it is the record of a voyage, a trade, a connection between cultures. Consider the statue of Hapi found in the temple of Amun at Thonis Herakleion. It was carved by a sculptor who spent months shaping the red granite into the form of the god. It was placed in the temple by priests who performed the rituals of consecration. It was worshipped by the faithful who came to the temple to pray for the floods that would water their fields. The statue stood in the temple for centuries, watching over the city before it fell into the sea. It is not just a statue, it is the embodiment of the faith of an entire civilization. Every artifact in a sunken city tells a story. The story of the person who made it, the person who used it, the person who lost it. The story of the civilization that created it, and the sea that claimed it. The artifacts are the voices of the past, speaking to us across the centuries. If we listen carefully, we can hear them. The questions that they ask are the same questions that we ask about ourselves. How did these people live? What did they believe? What did they value? What were their hopes and their fears? The sunken cities are mirrors that reflect our own humanity back at us. When we look at the ruins of a lost city, we see ourselves. We see our own cities, our own lives, our own mortality. The sunken cities remind us that we are part of a story that is larger than ourselves, a story that began long before we were born and will continue long after we are gone. We are the same. We build our cities on the coast because that is where the opportunities are. We understand the risks, but we accept them because the benefits are worth it. The sunken cities of the past are not judgments on the people who built them. They are records of the choices that people made, the risks that they took, the fates that they suffered. We can learn from their choices, but we cannot judge them. We are the same. We are just as vulnerable. We are just as temporary. The only difference is that we have the benefit of their example. We can learn from their mistakes. We can choose to build differently, to plan for the future, to respect the power of the sea. The sunken cities teach us humility. They remind us that our own civilization is not immune to the forces that destroyed the civilizations of the past. The ground beneath our feet is not as solid as we think. The sea is patient, and it will eventually reclaim what we have built on its shores. But this is not a cause for despair. It is a cause for awareness, for appreciation, for gratitude. The cities that we have built are gifts, and we should appreciate them while they last. The ocean is a library of human history. Its shelves are the seafloor. Its books are the sunken cities, the drowned villages, the lost ports, and the flooded temples. We have only begun to read this library. We have only opened a few of its books. The rest are waiting, their pages sealed by the water, their stories yet to be told. Each sunken city is a volume in this library. Each artifact is a sentence. Each building is a paragraph. The story of a sunken city is written in its streets and its walls and its artifacts. It is a story that can be read by those who know how to interpret the language of stones and bones and pottery. The archaeologists are the readers of this library, the translators of this language. They spend their lives learning to read the stories that are written in the ruins of the past. But the library is vast, and the number of readers is small. The ocean floor is covered with books that have not yet been opened, stories that have not yet been read. The work of reading these stories will continue for generations. There will always be more to discover, more to learn, more to understand. The library of the sea is infinite, and its stories are inexhaustible. And what stories they will tell. Stories of triumph and disaster, of wealth and poverty, of war and peace. Stories of civilizations that rose and fell, of peoples who adapted and survived, of cities that were swallowed by the sea. Every sunken city is a chapter in the history of our species. Every submerged settlement is a page in the book of human experience. The work of reading these stories is slow and painstaking. It requires patience and skill and resources. It requires divers and submarines and sonar and sediment cores. It requires the collaboration of archaeologists and geologists and oceanographers. It requires the support of governments and institutions, and it requires time. But the work is worth doing, because the sunken cities of the world are not just historical artifacts. They are warnings. They are reminders of the power of nature, of the fragility of human civilization. They tell us that the ground beneath our feet is not as solid as we think. They tell us that the sea is patient, that it will eventually reclaim what we have built on its shores. The sunken cities also offer hope. They show us that the past is not lost, that it can be recovered. They show us that the stories of those who came before us can be preserved, even when their world has been drowned. They show us that the human spirit is resilient, that we can adapt and survive, even when everything we have built is taken from us. The people who built the sunken cities were not so different from us. They had the same hopes and fears, the same dreams and ambitions. They built their cities with care and pride, believing that they would last forever. And when their cities sank, they did not give up. They moved to higher ground. They built new cities. They continued their lives. The resilience of the human spirit is one of the most remarkable things about our species. We adapt, We survive. We continue. The story of the sunken cities is not just a story of loss, it is also a story of resilience. The inhabitants of Thonis Heracleion moved to Alexandria, where they continued to trade and worship and live their lives. The inhabitants of Pavlopetri moved to the hills of the Peloponnese, where they built new settlements. The inhabitants of Atlit-Yam carried their knowledge of farming and fishing to new lands, shaping the culture of the region for thousands of years. The spirit of civilization is not defeated by the rising sea. It adapts and survives. We face a similar challenge today. The sea levels are rising, and the cities on our coasts are vulnerable. The same forces that submerged the cities of the past are at work today. But we have the knowledge and the technology to adapt. We can learn from the past. The sunken cities teach us that change is possible, that adaptation is possible, that survival is possible. The lesson of the sunken cities is a lesson of hope. The cycles of the earth are slow, but they are powerful. The ice ages come and go. The sea levels rise and fall. The continents shift and the mountains rise and fall. In the midst of all this change, human civilization has persisted. We have built cities and lost them. We have built again and lost again. But we have never stopped building. The sunken cities are monuments to the persistence of the human spirit, to our ability to endure and to adapt and to continue. They are not monuments to failure. They are monuments to resilience. The cities sank, but the people did not. The cities were lost, but the stories were not. The stones may rest beneath the water, but the spirit of civilization rises above it. There is a deeper lesson in the sunken cities as well. It is a lesson about impermanence and acceptance. The cities that we build will not last forever. The civilizations that we create will eventually fall. This is the nature of things. But this does not mean that our efforts are meaningless. The cities that we build, the civilizations that we create, they matter. They matter because they are the expression of our humanity, our creativity, our capacity for cooperation and for love. The sunken cities are proof that even when everything else is lost, the works of human hands and human minds endure. The sea is not an enemy. It is a preserver. It takes the cities that we have built and holds them in its depths, protecting them from the ravages of time. The sunken cities are not destroyed. They are preserved. They are waiting for us to find them, to learn from them, to be inspired by them. The deep is not a tomb. It is a sanctuary. And so the search for sunken cities continues. It is a search that will never end because there will always be more cities to find, more stories to discover, more mysteries to unravel. The ocean is vast, and the history that it holds is even vaster. We have only begun to explore the depths, only begun to read the books in the library of the sea. As we drift towards sleep, let us think of these sunken cities. Let us imagine them as they were, alive with the sounds of the market and the temple and the harbor. Let us imagine the people who walked their streets, who lived in their houses, who prayed in their temples. Let us imagine the moment when the water began to rise, when the first stones slipped beneath the waves, and let us imagine them now as they are, silent, dark, preserved. The streets still laid out in their ancient patterns, the walls still standing, though covered with marine growth, the statues still watching, their stone eyes gazing into the darkness. The sunken cities are down there now, as you read these words, as you drift toward sleep. They are resting in the cold and the dark, beneath the weight of the water. They are waiting. They will always be waiting. There is a deep peace in knowing that these places exist, that there are still mysteries in the world, that the past is still present beneath the surface of our everyday lives. The sunken cities are a reminder that the world is larger and stranger and more wonderful than we usually imagine. The waters of the ocean cover more than 70% of the surface of our planet, and beneath those waters there is a hidden world, a world of mountains and canyons and plains, a world of volcanoes and vents and springs, a world of life, strange and beautiful and alien, and a world of history, of the works of human hands that have been claimed by the sea. There is a particular kind of beauty that attaches to sunken cities. It is not the beauty of perfection, the clean lines of a newly built temple, or the bright colors of a freshly painted statue. It is the beauty of age, of wear, of transformation. The stones of the sunken cities have been worn smooth by centuries of current, the statues have been covered with the slow growth of the sea. The walls have been colonized by coral and anemones and sponges. The cities have become part of the ocean, and they have taken on the colors and the textures of the ocean. The marble that was once white is now covered with a patina of green and brown. The granite that was once polished is now rough with the growth of centuries. The bronze that was once gleaming is now encrusted with the minerals of the sea. The sunken cities are not diminished by this transformation. They are enhanced by it. They have become something new, something that is neither fully human nor fully natural, but a combination of both. There is a particular kind of beauty in the way the light plays on the stones of a sunken city. The water filters the sunlight, turning it into a soft, diffuse glow that moves with the currents. The shadows of the buildings shift and change as the sun moves across the sky. The colors of the walls and the statues are softened and muted, as if seen through a veil. The effect is dreamlike, otherworldly, a vision of a world that is both familiar and strange. There is also a particular kind of truth in sunken cities. The cities that we build above ground are constantly changing. They are renovated and rebuilt and repurposed. The original form of a city is often lost, buried under centuries of modification. But the sunken cities are different. They have not been changed since they were submerged. The streets are the same streets that the inhabitants walked. The walls are the same walls that they built. The cities are frozen in time, preserved in their original form. This preservation is a gift to archaeologists and to all of us who are curious about the past. The sunken cities allow us to see the past as it was, without the layers of later modification that obscure the history of above-ground sites. We can walk the same streets that the ancient inhabitants walked. We can see the same buildings that they saw. We can touch the same stones that they touched. The sunken cities are not just ruins. They are time capsules, preserving a moment in the history of human civilization. This is why sunken cities are so valuable to archaeologists. They are not just ruins. They are snapshots of the past, moments frozen in time. The city of Port Royal preserves the 17th century. The city of Pavlopetri preserves the Bronze Age. The village of Atlit Yam preserves the Neolithic. Each sunken city is a window into a specific moment in history, a moment that has been preserved by the accident of submersion. The sunken cities also remind us of the connection between human civilization and the natural world. The cities that we build are not separate from nature. They are part of it. The stones that we cut and shape are the stones of the earth. The water that we drink and use is the water of the sea and the sky. The air that we breathe is the air of the atmosphere. We are not apart from the world. We are part of it. And when our cities are reclaimed by the sea, they become part of the ocean, part of the cycle of the planet. This is a comforting thought in a way. It means that nothing is truly lost. The sunken cities are not gone. They are transformed. The stones are still there even if they are covered with water. The stories are still there, even if they are written in a language that we are still learning to read. The past is not dead. It is just sleeping. Consider the Persian Gulf, for example. Before the sea levels rose at the end of the last ice age, the Persian Gulf was a fertile valley, watered by the confluence of the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. This valley was one of the cradles of human civilization. It was here that some of the earliest farming communities were established. It was here that the first cities were built. And it was here that the first written language was developed, the cuneiform script of the Sumerians. But the valley of the Persian Gulf is now underwater. The rising sea at the end of the last ice age flooded the valley, submerging the settlements of the first farmers and the first city dwellers. The evidence of their presence, their homes and their fields and their temples, lies beneath the waters of the Gulf. The ancient landscape is still there, preserved beneath the sediment, waiting to be discovered. Some scholars have suggested that the Persian Gulf Valley is the location of the biblical Garden of Eden. The description in the book of Genesis of a garden watered by 4 rivers, a garden that was lost to a flood, matches the geography of the region. The Eden story may be a memory of the flooding of the Persian Gulf Valley, a memory of a paradise that was lost to the rising sea. The underwater archaeology of the Persian Gulf is still in its early stages. The waters of the Gulf are shallow and warm, and the sediment that covers the ancient landscape is thick, but the potential for discovery is immense. The Persian Gulf may hold the remains of the earliest human civilizations, civilizations that were drowned by the sea before they could be recorded by history. The same is true of the Nile Delta. The delta of the Nile is one of the most fertile regions in the world, and it has been inhabited for thousands of years. The ancient cities of the delta were centers of trade and culture, connecting Egypt to the Mediterranean world. But the delta is also sinking. The sediment that makes the delta so fertile also compresses under its own weight, causing the land to subside. The rising sea levels of the modern era are accelerating this process, and large areas of the delta are being lost to the sea. The submerged cities of the Nile Delta are among the most important archaeological sites in the world. The delta was the heart of ancient Egypt, the region where the pharaohs built their palaces and their temples. The cities that were lost to the sea in the delta include not just Thonis Heraclean, but also Canopus and Meneuthus and other settlements. The waters of the delta hold the remains of a civilization that has shaped the world. The search for these lost cities is a race against time. The sediment that covers them is being eroded by the currents and the waves. The structures that have been preserved for centuries are being exposed to the elements. The artifacts that have been hidden for millennia are being scattered. Every year that passes, the sunken cities of the Nile Delta become more difficult to study, and yet, the work continues. The archaeologists are using the latest technology to survey the seafloor and to excavate the remains. They are finding new statues and new temples and new artifacts. The lost cities of the Nile Delta are being found, one by one. The sunken cities that we know about are just a small fraction of what lies beneath. Every coast in the world has its own submerged history. The Mediterranean is rich with them. The Black Sea holds countless more. The waters of Asia and Africa and the Americas are full of drowned settlements. The ocean is a vast archaeological site, and we have only scratched the surface. The work of exploring this underwater world will continue for generations. New technologies will allow us to see deeper and more clearly. New sunken cities will be found, and old ones will reveal new secrets. But for now, we can rest. We can let our minds drift down through the water, descending into the silence. We can imagine the cities below, their stones worn smooth by centuries of current, their statues draped in the slow growth of the sea. We can feel the weight of the water above them, the pressure that holds them in place, the darkness that surrounds them. It is a peaceful image. A city at rest. A civilization sleeping. The water is a blanket. It covers the stones and the streets and the temples, protecting them from the air and the light. The water is a keeper of secrets. It takes the stories of the past and holds them close, revealing them only to those who are patient enough to seek them out. We are those seekers. We are the ones who look at the sea and wonder. We are the ones who imagine the cities below, the civilizations that have been lost, the stories that wait to be told. The ocean calls to us, and we answer. But now it is time to rest. The journey has been long. The depths are deep. The mysteries are many. But sleep is also a kind of depth, a kind of submersion. When we sleep, we descend into our own inner darkness. We let go of the surface world. We drift. Let sleep take you now. Let it carry you down, as the water carried the cities down. Let the images of the sunken places fill your mind, the statues, the temples, the streets of stone, the silence. You are floating above them now. You are looking down through the water, watching the dim shapes below. The sunken cities are beautiful in their stillness. They are peaceful in their silence. They are at rest, and you can rest with them. The water is dark, but it is not frightening. It is warm and safe, like the darkness behind closed eyelids. The pressure of the water is gentle, like the weight of a blanket. The silence is deep, like the silence of a sleeping house. Let the cities fade now. Let them dissolve into the darkness. They will still be there tomorrow, waiting. The sunken cities are patient. They have been waiting for centuries. They can wait a little longer. And so can we. We can wait in the darkness, resting, floating, letting the weight of the day slip away. The sunken cities are a reminder that everything passes, that all civilizations eventually fall, that all works of human hands will one day be reclaimed by the earth and the sea. But they are also a reminder that even in loss, there is preservation. Even in silence, there is story. Even in darkness, there is beauty. The first light of morning will come. The surface will call us back. But for now, we are here, in the deep, with the sunken cities. We are here, in the silence, at peace. The sunken cities are not just places. They are states of being. They are the embodiment of patience, of endurance, of the slow passage of time. The stones of the sunken cities have been resting in the darkness for centuries, and they will rest there for centuries more. They have learned the lesson of patience, and they teach it to those who visit them. Be patient now. Let the restlessness of the surface world fade away. The problems and the worries and the distractions of the day are like the waves on the surface, noisy and constant. But beneath the waves, there is stillness. Beneath the noise, there is silence. Beneath the surface, there is peace. The sunken cities are a refuge from the surface. They are a place where the noise of the world cannot reach. The water that covers them is a barrier, a shield, a protector. The cities are safe in their darkness, safe in their silence, and you are safe with them. There is nothing that you need to do. There is nowhere that you need to go. There is no one that you need to be. You are free, in this moment, to simply exist, to breathe, to rest, to be. The sunken city accepts you as you are. It does not judge you. It does not demand anything from you. It simply is, and it invites you to be as well. The stones do not care about your accomplishments or your failures. The water does not care about your worries or your fears. The darkness does not care about your past or your future. All of these things belong to the surface. Here, in the deep, there is only the present moment, and the present moment is peaceful. Let your breathing slow. Let it become deeper, more regular. Each breath draws in the cool, dark air of the deep. Each breath releases the tension of the surface. With each exhalation, you sink a little deeper into the silence. With each inhalation, you draw in a little more of the peace of the sunken city. The city is all around you now. The stones are your companions. The water is your element. The darkness is your comfort. There is no separation between you and the city. You have become part of it, and it has become part of you. The streets of the sunken city are your streets now. The walls of the sunken city are your walls. The temple of the sunken city is your sanctuary. You belong here, in this place outside of time. The creatures of the deep move around you in the darkness. They are not afraid of you. You are not a threat to them. You are just another presence in the water, another part of the world of the deep. The fish swim past you, their scales catching the faint light. The crabs crawl along the stones, their legs clicking softly. The anemones wave their tentacles in the current, filtering the water for food. All of these creatures are part of the life of the sunken city, a life that continues without regard for the surface world. The city was once a place of human life, of human activity, of human noise. The markets were filled with the shouts of merchants and the haggling of customers. The temples were filled with the scent of incense and the chanting of priests and the prayers of the faithful. The harbors were filled with the creaking of ships and the calls of sailors. The streets were filled with the footsteps of people going about their daily lives. The children played in the courtyards, their laughter echoing off the stone walls. The women gathered at the wells, sharing news and gossip as they drew water for their households. The men worked in the fields and the workshops, their labor supporting the life of the city. The elders sat in the doorways of their houses, watching the passage of time, the coming and going of the generations. The city was alive, vibrant, full of the energy of human existence, full of the warmth of human connection. And now it is silent. The noises have faded. The voices have fallen silent. The footsteps have stopped. But the memory of the life that once filled the city is still there, written in the stones, carried in the water, held in the silence. All of that is gone now. The noise has faded. The activity has ceased. The life has moved on. What remains is the silence, the deep and profound silence of a city that has been emptied of its people. But the silence is not empty. It is full of the memory of all that came before. It is full of the presence of the past. The sunken city remembers. It remembers the people who built it and the people who lived in it. It remembers their joys and their sorrows. It remembers their triumphs and their defeats. The memory is written in the stones, in the layout of the streets, in the foundations of the buildings. The city is a monument to the lives that were lived within its walls. And now, you are part of that memory. Your presence here, in this moment, adds to the story of the sunken city. You are a visitor, a witness, a keeper of the memory. When you return to the surface, you will carry the memory of the city with you. You will be a link between the sunken world and the world above. But for now, there is no need to carry anything. There is no need to remember or to record. There is only the need to be present, to be still, to be at peace. The city will remember itself. The stones will hold their own memory. You are free to simply be. Let the water hold you. Let the darkness wrap around you. Let the weight of the ocean press gently against you, reminding you that you are small, that the world is vast, that the past is deep. Let the stories of the lost cities fill your dreams. The darkness of the deep is not empty. It is full of presence. The presence of the cities that sleep beneath the waves. The presence of the people who built them and lived in them and lost them. The presence of the stories that are waiting to be told. You are surrounded by this presence, held by it, comforted by it. You are not alone in the darkness. You are part of a vast community of souls, stretching across time and space, connected by the thread of human experience. The sunken cities are the anchors of this community. They are the fixed points in the flow of time, the places where the past is still present. They hold the memories of our species, the hopes and the fears and the dreams of those who came before us. When you rest in the presence of a sunken city, you are resting in the presence of history itself. And history is patient. It does not demand anything from you. It does not require you to understand or to remember or to learn. It simply invites you to be present, to be still, to be part of the great flow of time. The sunken cities are the embodiment of this patience. They have been waiting for centuries. They can wait for you to rest. So rest now. Let your mind settle like the silt that falls through the water, slowly, gently, coming to rest on the sea floor. Let your thoughts become still, like the water in the depths where no current reaches, where no surface disturbance penetrates. Let your breath become slow and deep, like the rhythm of the tides, the eternal pulse of the ocean. The sunken cities are not going anywhere. They will be here when you wake, if you choose to return to them. But for now, they are here with you, in the stillness, in the silence, in the peace. They are your companions in the deep, the streets of Thonis Heracleon, lined with statues of gods, the walls of Dwarka, rising from the mud of the Gulf of Kambat, the grid of Pavlopetri, laid out in the clear Greek water, the ruins of Port Royal scattered across the floor of Kingston Harbor, the marble of Baiae glowing in the blue light of the Bay of Naples, the stones of Atlet Yam pointing to a star that has not changed its position in 7,000 years, the church of Rungholt standing in the mudflats of the North Sea, the pagodas of Shicheng rising from the waters of Qiandao Lake, the temple of Helike resting in the waters of the Gulf of Corinth, the harbor of Caesarea held together by Roman concrete, the walls of Kakova visible through the clear water of the Turkish coast, the canals of Nan Madol slowly being reclaimed by the Pacific, the road of Bimini stretching across the floor of the Bahamas, the villa of the Papyri in the waters of Herculaneum, the temple of Lake Titicaca high in the Andes, the cenotes of the Yucatan holding the remains of the first Americans, the sunken cities of the Persian Gulf waiting to be discovered, the settlements of Doggerland buried beneath the North Sea. These are the places we have visited. These are the cities that sleep beneath the sea. And as we sleep, we join them in their slumber. We become, for a time, part of the silence. The sunken cities will be there when you wake. The ocean will still hold them in its depths. The mystery will still be there, waiting. But for now, rest. Let the darkness take you. Let the silence surround you. Let the deep receive you. It is time to sleep. The weight of the world above you fades as you drift down through the blue water. The light from the surface grows dimmer and dimmer until it is just a memory, a faint glow in the distance above. The water around you turns from blue to indigo to black. And in that darkness, you are not alone. The sunken cities are there. They have been waiting for you. Their stones are old. Their silence is ancient. Their peace is profound. You settle on the seafloor, gently, like the silt that falls through the water. You rest among the stones of a city that has not felt the touch of sunlight in 1,000 years. The currents move around you, soft and slow. The creatures of the deep pass by, indifferent to your presence. You are a guest in their world. You are a visitor to the sunken city. And the city accepts you. It welcomes you into its silence. It offers you its peace. The stones are cool beneath your hand. The water is dark around you. The sound of your breathing is the only sound, rhythmic and hypnotic, like the pulse of the sea itself. There is no need to explore. There is no need to understand. There is only the need to be present, to rest, to let the deep hold you. The sunken cities are not puzzles to be solved. They are places to be experienced. They are worlds to be entered. And you have entered one now. The city stretches out around you in the darkness. You cannot see it all, but you can feel it. The walls, the streets, the temples, the tombs. They are all there, beneath the sediment, beneath the water, beneath the centuries. They are the bones of a civilization laid to rest in the ocean, and you rest with them. You are part of the silence now. You are part of the deep. The boundaries between you and the city begin to blur. You are not separate from the stones and the water and the darkness. You are part of it all. You are part of the memory of the sunken city. This is the gift of the deep. It dissolves the boundaries. It reminds us that we are not apart from the world, but part of it. The sunken cities are not separate from the ocean. They are the ocean, transformed by human hands and then reclaimed. And we are not separate from them. We are part of the same story, the same cycle of building and falling and being absorbed. Let your thoughts drift now. Let them wander through the streets of the sunken city, exploring the empty houses, the silent temples, the overgrown courtyards. There is nothing to fear here. The city is at peace. The souls of those who built it have moved on, leaving only the stones behind. And the stones are peaceful. The architecture of the city speaks of a different time. The proportions are different. The materials are different. The style is strange, unfamiliar. It belongs to a world that no longer exists, a world that was drowned before our ancestors were born. And yet, there is something familiar about it. The way the houses are arranged around the courtyard, the way the temple faces the east, the way the streets are laid out in a grid. These are patterns that appear in human settlements everywhere, across all cultures and all times. They are the patterns of civilization itself. You walk through the streets of the sunken city, and you feel the presence of the past, not as a ghost, but as a memory. The memory of the people who lived here, who built these walls, who walked these streets. The memory of their joys and their sorrows, their hopes and their fears. The memory of their lives, lived in the light that the water now filters and dims. The city is a record of those lives. The stones are the pages, the artifacts are the words, and the silence is the binding that holds it all together. Every stone in the sunken city was placed by human hands. Every wall was built with human effort. Every street was walked by human feet. The city is a monument to the labor and the love and the lives of the people who built it, and that monument endures, even in the darkness of the deep. The silence of the sunken city is not the silence of emptiness. It is the silence of completion. The work of the city is done. The lives of its people have been lived. The story of its civilization has been told. What remains is the silence of a story that has reached its end. A silence that is full of meaning, full of memory, full of peace. You reach out and touch the wall of a house. The stone is rough, covered with the growth of centuries. The mortar that once held it together has dissolved, but the wall still stands, pressed in place by the weight of the water. It will stand for a long time yet. The sea is not in a hurry, and neither are you. You have all the time in the world. There is nowhere to go, nothing to do. Only this, only the deep, only the silence, only the sunken city holding its stories in the darkness. The stories are safe here. They have been safe for centuries. They will be safe for centuries more, and you are safe with them. Let your eyes close now. Let the sight of the city fade. Let the stones dissolve into the blackness behind your eyelids. The city is still there, but you do not need to see it. You can feel it. You can sense its presence in the darkness, like the presence of a sleeping companion in a quiet room. The sound of your breathing is a soft rhythm, marking the time in a place where time has no meaning. Breathe in. Breathe out. The water moves in and out of your lungs, the air that sustains you, the gift of the surface that you carry with you into the deep. Breathe in. Breathe out. The sunken city breathes with you. The currents move in and out of its streets like the flow of air through the rooms of a house. The city is alive in its own way, not with the life of human beings, but with the life of the sea. The creatures that live among the ruins, the plants that grow on the walls, the water that moves through the streets. The city is a reef now, an artificial reef, built by human hands and claimed by the ocean. And as a reef, it is full of life. The fish dart through the windows of the houses, in and out, their silver bodies flashing in the faint light. The coral grows on the walls, building its own structures on top of the structures of the city. The anemones wave their tentacles from the doorways, catching the particles that drift past. The city has been transformed. It is no longer a human place. It is a place of the sea, and yet the human shape is still visible. The walls still define the rooms. The streets still define the paths. The temple still defines the center. The human intention is still there, carved into the stone, preserved in the layout. The city is a ghost, but a ghost that has been adopted by the sea. You are a ghost, too, in your own way. A visitor from the surface passing through a world that does not belong to you. But for this moment, you are welcome. The city accepts you. The sea accepts you. The silence accepts you. Let the darkness wrap around you like a blanket. Let the weight of the water press you gently into the sand. Let the sounds of the deep become your lullaby. The distant song of a whale traveling through the ocean for thousands of miles. The crackle of shrimp, their tiny claws snapping in the darkness. The hum of the earth itself, the tectonic plates grinding against each other far below. The gentle murmur of the currents as they flow through the streets of the sunken city, the soft rustle of the seaweed as it sways in the water, the faint, almost imperceptible sound of the city itself, settling into its ancient rest. These are the sounds of the deep. They are not frightening. They are the sounds of a living world, a world that continues to exist beneath the surface, beneath the noise of our daily lives. They are the sounds of a planet that is still creating itself, still moving, still changing. They are the sounds of a city that has found its peace. The deep is not a place of silence, not truly. It is a place of subtle sounds, of faint vibrations, of gentle movements. The ear attuned to the deep hears not the noise of the surface, but the music of the earth itself. The pulse of the planet, the breath of the sea, the heartbeat of the sunken city. Listen to this music now. Let it carry you deeper into the rest that awaits you. The song of the whale fades into the distance. The crackle of the shrimp becomes a soft background hum. The groan of the earth becomes a deep, resonant tone, like the sound of a great bell ringing far beneath the surface. The currents whisper their secrets to the stones. The seaweed sways in the rhythm of an ancient dance. The city settles, and you settle with it. There is no need to hold on to anything. There is no need to keep watch. The sunken city is at peace, and you are safe within it. Let go of the last threads of wakefulness. Let them drift away like strands of kelp in the current, carried off into the darkness. You are falling now, falling into the deepest sleep, the sleep of the deep, the sleep that has been waiting for you since the beginning of time. The water supports you, the darkness comforts you, the silence surrounds you. There is nothing left to do but rest. And in the midst of all this change, the sunken city rests. It has been resting for centuries. It will rest for centuries more. The water that covers it will not go away. The land that it was built on will not rise again. The city is part of the deep now, and it will remain part of the deep until the earth itself is swallowed by the sun. That is a long time, longer than we can imagine, longer than our species has existed. The sunken city will be there for all of that time, slowly being worn away, slowly being absorbed, slowly becoming part of the geology of the planet. And we are part of that process too. The atoms that make up our bodies were once part of the earth, and they will be part of the earth again. The water that fills the ocean was once part of the sky, and it will return to the sky. Everything cycles. Everything changes. The sunken city is a lesson in impermanence, a reminder that nothing lasts, that all things pass. But in this moment, the city exists. It is here. It is real. And you are here with it, sharing its space, sharing its silence. The moment is enough. The presence is enough. The deep is enough. Let the city fade now. Let it become part of the darkness. Let the image of the stones and the streets dissolve into a deeper sleep. The city will be there when you wake, if you choose to return to it. But for now, it is time to let go. It is time to drift even deeper into the sleep that has no images, no thoughts, no dreams. The sleep of the deep, the sleep of the sunken city. You are the city now. The boundaries have dissolved. You are the stones and the streets and the silence. You are the water and the darkness and the peace. There is no separation between you and the deep. The sunken city holds you in its ancient embrace, and you sleep. Rest now. Rest in the deep. Rest in the silence. Rest in the knowledge that you are part of something vast and ancient and beautiful. The sunken cities of the world are not lost. They are preserved, and you are preserved with them in this moment of perfect peace.